How do you do? I'm the Reverend Bill D. Ortega. I'm a Christian historian. I generally do work on the healing ministry of the church, but today I want to talk about a serious issue on conspiracy theories and how damaging they are. Uh, and they are really a form of counterfeit history. Let me read you something that Jesus said that puts conspiracy theories in context. This is from Matthew 12, verse 39 and 35 and 36, rather. The good man brings good things out of good stored up in him, and the evil man brings evil things out of evil stored up in him. But I tell you that the men will have to give account on the day of judgment for every careless word they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. That's pretty serious stuff. So if we issue a lie or a damaging conspiracy theory, that can be very harmful, and the Lord will judge you for that. Let me start off by giving a homegrown conspiracy theory that I saw just before my eyes years ago, back in 1974, as a matter of fact. Now, for background, Egypt and Syria attacked Israel on the eve of Yom Kippur, and it's called the Yom Kippur War. And they had a terrific go at it at the beginning. Israel was losing, but it recovered and counterattacked. However, in the course of the counterattack, the Israeli Army and Air Force used up most of their high-tech ammunition, as in anti-tank missiles and stuff like that, and they were a threat of losing the war. President Nixon organized a massive airlift directly from the United States to Israel to resupply these high-tech weapons. The Arabs were furious at this because Nixon had snatched victory from the jaws of defeat from Israel, and they were just furious, and they organized an oil embargo. Most of the petroleum products and oil in the United States. Texas and Oklahoma produce a certain fraction, but fracking had not been invented, so we were heavily dependent on foreign sources, Nigeria plus OPEC. So this cost us a lot. President Nixon immediately lowered the interstate speed limit 5 miles an hour. There were long lines in the in the gasoline stations, other inconveniences. And if you're old enough to remember, you probably remember the long lines at the gas stations. Well, at the time I was working with a group of, one of my colleagues went to Louisiana on vacation, and the Louisiana coast to see his family. And when he returned, he said, Bill, this gas shortage is baloney. It's invented by the oil executives to jack up our prices. I said, what do you believe that? He said, I saw this huge refinery. It was in operation. I saw oil tankers out there. There's more than enough gas for everybody in the United States. Now, how did he know that? Or why did he think he knew that? Actually, it was a very ignorant statement. He didn't know whether the refinery was working on 30% capacity or 80% capacity or whatever. More importantly, the Lord hadn't risen him to a point up in space in which he could see every single gas station in the United States and how low they were, how many cars were using, and sort of add up cars, gas tanks, equivalent to the supply of gasoline. Now, he didn't have that information. He just stupidly assumed that because he saw a very large refinery, that would meet all the needs. And of course, that's nonsense. There are many, I'm going to speculate, there are at least a dozen refineries in the United States and produced. So he saw one and he thought, oh, the oil executives are trying to jack up a price unnecessarily. That's not true. The price of gas went up because the supply went down and the demand was the same. And if you know basic economics, that means the prices go up. But notice, not only was this untruthful, it kind of satisfied him. He thought he had superior wisdom when in fact he was a boob. Yeah, God bless him. He is a not very intelligent man, but he thought he had superior wisdom over the rest of us. He knew that the gasoline executives were at fault, and also it implies, although he didn't intend it, an indirect slander at the oil executives. He thought they were people. Now, granted, how many thousands are in the United States? And like any group of people, well, let me tell you a secret. Every social group is made up of 100% sinners. So among these oil executives, I'm sure there are many who are very, very greedy, but you don't know if they're the ones who jacked up the price. And they didn't. It was a supply and demand issue. So he's slandering a whole group to satisfy his sense of superior wisdom. Now, some conspiracy theories can be very serious. For instance, the Jews have had horrible conspiracy theories against them. During the Black Death in the medieval Europe, which killed, between 40 and 50% of the European population, the rumor started that the Jews had caused it by poisoning the wells in order to get rid of the Christians. This was ridiculous and illogical. And the Christians, even sometimes good Christians, believed this because they already had a pre-existing prejudice against Jews. They started rounding up Jews and burning them to death. Hundreds of thousands, and many were exiled. Poland was safe for this, so many Jews went to Poland. Some went to the Arab countries, etc. But hundreds of thousands were burned to death on this rumor. The Pope tried to stop it and said very logically, hey, this is not true because Jews are dying of bubonic plague just as much as Christians. And of course, we know that the bubonic plague is started by an infected rat and the lice that bites them and then bites a human. But they had no idea about this in the Middle Ages. So it was satisfying to blame the Jews for this great evil. In a sense, communism, Marxism, is a cluster of conspiracy theories. I would suggest every Christian read, it's not very long, the Communist Manifesto with discernment. Hatred for the bourgeois, for the middle. He believes that they're the cause of all evil. They produce unnecessary innovation, which has long-term consequences in Marxism because they're slow on innovation, and that they disrupt society and they're greedy and all of that. Again, committing the elementary spiritual sin of putting all evil on a group of people. And this has gone down through society. When radical Marxists take over a country, like in the Pol Pot of Cambodia, or Stalin, or the Minoso of Peru, they start killing the bourgeois, whether the individual shopkeeper is a good guy, really does exploit his people. They don't. You're marked for death. That's the fruit of that conspiracy theory, is that evil, and it has generated many genocides, unnecessary genocides. Okay, so let me define a conspiracy theory. A conspiracy theory is an attempt to understand some evil or wrongness of the world by incomplete or incorrect information. It satisfies the believer of the conspiracy theory in that he and she have wisdom that is superior to the rest of folks. Conspiracy theories confuse hypothesis for fact. And of course, most conspiracy theories have a hidden or not so hidden slander of some group. One particular group is the cause of evil, and then you'll have utopia in the world. The problem is, with some conspiracy theories, it's difficult. Is it really a false conspiracy theory, or is it really a hypothesis of something that really is? For instance, I hold to one conspiracy theory, and I think it's starting to unravel now. I believe the government, for reasons that we do not know, has withheld information on UFOs. I sincerely believe that the universe is so vast, it's populated by other spiritual beings, and we're under observation. I have not seen a UFO, but I have interviewed several people who have seen them, and I use my historical skills of interviewing someone and seeing, do they have a reason to lie on this? Are they getting self-glorification or some economic benefit? And the answer is no, including my brother in the 1950s UFO, and a friend at work who served on the U.S. Coast Guard, and he had an incident with his ship was observed by CFO, very close range. It went under the ship, came up the other side, continued to observing it, and then left. When they docked, they were met by, according to him, they were met by a high-ranking officer who swore secrecy, said, "This is a state secret, you cannot reveal this." Now, I tend to believe that. He was a sincere Christian. He had no gain in trying to fool me, etc. We were just theoretically discussing UFOs. Okay, but aside from that, let's get back to political conspiracy theories, which can be very, very harmful. Conspiracy theories exist both in the left and in the right. Let me give you two quick conspiracy theories. You know, we don't tend to think of Marxism as conspiracy theory. We think it's an ideology, but it's an ideology, a political ideology based on conspiracy theories that the bourgeois is the source of all evil. Okay, for instance, Jim Jones of Guyana. Now, this happened maybe 15 years ago. He forced his cult followers to drink Kool-Aid with poison, and hundreds were killed. He had a conspiracy theory that the CIA was out to get him, and they were just about to launch a paratroop attack on his community and kill everybody. So the best thing to do is to go voluntarily, raptured into another planet. He was into New Age stuff, into another planet, perfect socialist planet. Well, that was his conspiracy theory, very tragic. Another conspiracy theory that had some credence was that the CIA invented AIDS in order to kill off the homosexuals. This was actually, historians have traced this actually to East German intelligence, which wanted to damage the United States, misinformation, the way the Russians are still doing that today. It's really not true. Scientifically, it's been proven that AIDS originated as a virus within the green monkeys. The green monkeys are not green, but just call that, in Central Africa, and it lived in the colonies of green monkeys, making them mildly sick for generations. And then sometime in the 1950s, it jumped over to humans, but in such an isolated area that there was no transportation, so it stayed there until the jet age, and it got away, and it went to Haiti and a couple of other places, very tragically killing so many millions of people. But for some people, it's by saying the CIA, the evil CIA, this to etc. Awful. Let me talk about a couple of Republican conservative conspiracy theories. Not quite as harmful, but still very disturbing. And contrary to the Christian understanding of history, that bad things happen. You know, we're not promised in the Bible that if you're a believer in God, everything good is going to happen. Bad things happen. So, a very common conspiracy theory that originated in 1944 and has been republished several times is that Roosevelt orchestrated the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. He wanted us to fight in World War II, and therefore he encouraged the Japanese and actually orchestrated it so that they would attack Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt really wanted to get into World War II to fight. What the plan was, and of course plans go awry, to fight Germany first and worry about the Japanese later. He rightly saw that Germany was more immediate threat to the world's democracies because they had such superior science. And that was true. So when World War II broke out, the Japanese attacked us and then Germany declared war on us. They had to decide how much of the Allied war effort was going to go to Germany and how much to Japan. And according to the plan, then most of the divisions and war effort went to Germany, towards Germany, but enough to hold the Japanese at bay and actually counterattack. If you ever have a chance, go look at the back to this conspiracy. The conspiracy theory. A group of dozens of very high-ranking Army and Air Force officials colluded with Roosevelt to plan to get the Japanese to us. Nonsense. Well, that's the slander on the officer corps, that they would do, dozens and dozens of high-ranking officers would do such a treasonous act and give away the American fleet just to get the Japanese just to get us to start into World War II. That's the slander there. If you get a chance, see the picture, Tora. It really gives you the right scoop on it. And a couple of things are a little bit unclear. Let me clarify. By the way, it was a masterful execution of a surprise attack, coordinating 5 carriers, which the Japanese did, was a skill that the U.S. Navy did not have until 1 year after the war started. It's not easy to do that. So the Japanese attacked us. They had actually a superior aircraft to zero, etc. And you see in Tora, which is true. The officer of Pearl Harbor, this is, coming into the morning, he's the only officer. He could have pressed a button or raised the phone and brought Pearl Harbor into maximum alert and have the aircraft off the ground, etc., to meet the attack. A radar operator of a radar station that was just established about a couple of days before the Pearl Harbor attack, warned them, "I see a tremendous fleet. I've never seen so many airplanes coming towards you." And he said, "Yeah, thanks a lot, kid. Thank you." Boom. He had been briefed the night before that the B-17 fleet of, I'm going to say about a dozen B-17s were coming in just at that time. So he thought, tragic mistake, that this kid was overexcited over this radar imprint when it was really our own B-17s flying in. And in fact, just as the attack, because they weren't ready for war, it was a mess. Okay. Also, the picture shows how the code was broken, but they didn't have enough time to send it to Pearl Harbor because the radio communication, shortwave radio, was a little iffy in those days, and they didn't have communication at that moment with Pearl Harbor. So the message actually gets there while the attack is in way. Now, lots of help, Okay. So, but a lot of Republicans had a fierce hatred for Franklin Roosevelt, just the way Republicans hate Obama and other Republicans, just a fierce hatred for him. So this was great. They had to sense this suspicion. Roosevelt's an evil man. What happened at Pearl Harbor is evil man, an evil event, and any suspicion theory. Let me JFK, President Kennedy, had minor conspiracy theories among him. He didn't live long enough to have a super one generated like the Pearl Harbor thing. There was a conspiracy theory that he was going to organize a United Nations army to invade America and bring in a communist regime. There's no such thing as a United Nations army. By the way, when you hear in the radio United Nations peacekeepers, they are individual national armies contracted to do a job, like a certain number of American troops, and I don't know if it's a battalion or a couple of companies, are on the Egyptian Israeli border to make sure there is to ensure peace and separation of the armies. They're under United Nations auspices, but it's not a United Nations army. So there's no such thing as a United Nations army. But people like to believe all sorts of fantasies. Okay, let me talk about a more serious conspiracy theater that should have been caught at the bud, but was not. And it refers to the Jade Helm exercise in 2015, Army exercise. This was Obama was president, and the exercise was performed over Texas, Arizona, California, in the southeast there, and the exercise was on how to stop a truck with a atom bomb or a nuclear weapon from crossing the border. The thinking is one of the things that might happen is terrorists get hold of an atom bomb, and instead of using an airplane, because it's hard to terrorists, use a truck, disguised as furniture or whatever, and bring it over to one of our cities and blow it to smithereens. So this was a very legitimate and necessary exercise. Now, the Army had been exercising for periodically ever since World War II. As a matter of fact, Eisenhower was a colonel in the what's called the invasion of Louisiana, in which the Blue Army and the Red Army, which were both American soldiers, fought each other in mock, and exercise and develop their tactics. And one of the important lessons of that 1940 exercise was that the Army indeed needed mechanized divisions, and not just have the tanks scattered all over a single Army division. Anyway, so it was an important exercise, and Jade Helm was one of many exercises. Okay, the conspiracy theory, because Obama was so hated, was by certain Republicans, that Obama this was a plot, conservative Christian Texans, disarm them and put them in Walmarts, empty Walmarts, as sort of a concentration camp. Now, this is ludicrously ridiculous, but conspiracy theories have a way of working on the hatred that suspends reason. Now, 1,200 special forces against, how many guess, 5 or 6 million right-wing Texans who are very heavily armed with assault weapons, and sometimes they even have these 50 caliber sniper rifles that can shoot 2 miles, etc. Disarm them, stuff them into Walmarts, which were being remodeled. Several Walmarts were being remodeled, sort of as concentration camp, and then take over Texas. Now, how ridiculous can you get? But again, hatred, unforgiveness overrides reason. Now, I greatly fault Governor Abbott. About this on the Day of Judgment, I will apologize to him. He knew better, but he pandered to the fears of the Texas conservatives and said, well, I'll make sure this doesn't happen. I'm going to mobilize Texas Army Reserve officers to go with these soldiers and make sure they're not done any monkey business. What he should have gone on television and said, ladies and gentlemen of Texas, fellow citizens, this is a conspiracy theory. It's totally bogus. The Army has serious business in rehearsing some things that can possibly happen to us, and please welcome them. Well, the way, for instance, in the invasion of Louisiana in 1940, the people of Louisiana welcomed with open arms and billeted many of the soldiers. Very often they were invited into private homes in a patriotic way. But rather, Governor Abbott pandered to this conspiracy theory. I guess it was politically good for him, but it certainly was not right. Was not right. He knew better. Okay, let me tempt you into turning off this video by saying, I think Trump's accusations of the election fraud were at very least, some part false conspiracy theories, and it's starting to unravel. For instance, the whole story that the machines were rigged is now unraveling, and for instance, Fox News backtracked on that. They didn't want to get sued, but a lot of lawsuits are on this because it basically ruined the reputation of the company that made these election machines by falsely claiming that they were rigged, and they were not. I live in Georgia. I've lived in Georgia since I got out of the Army in 1973 or whatever, and I was a poll worker at 3 elections ago, and I was impressed by the dedication and the honesty of the poll workers. They really wanted to get, the vote right, and there were a lot of procedures about the person not having the right ID, and he could do a provisional ballot and all that stuff. I was really very impressed, and Now, some of you may be angry at this, that Trump's accusation to the Republican governor of Georgia and a very honest and a man of integrity who is the Republican Secretary of State, that they somehow did something evil by not reporting more Republican votes is a slander and a conspiracy theory. Hold Trump accountable to this, among others. And it has done a lot of damage. I don't believe any of the conspiracy theories are true, but of course, many of you do believe that, and we'll see history prove on this. Okay, now I want to finish by pointing out that the Bible is not a book of conspiracy theories. Rather, the Bible says that mankind is sinful and very often stupid and does stupid mistakes. And there's no such thing as an evil group doing all of the evil of society. Rather, we see in the book of Judges a pattern that if a people who are called by God are disobedient to his laws, then bad things start to happen. The invaders start to come in. And it's not others, it's yourself. You're fallen in this way. There's a wonderful passage that you don't see. You see, there is no other scripture in world religions that is so consistently critical of its own people. We have whole books of prophets saying, you are sinning, you have to return to Yahweh, etc. You don't see that in Buddhist scriptures. All you see is do this, do that, avoid that. But you don't have this prophetic movement pointing a finger. You are messing up. There are going to be consequences to that. And for instance, the fall of Jerusalem. Let me read you to that. This is from 2 Chronicles. This is the last of Chronicles, 36. The Lord, the God of our fathers, sent word to them through his messengers again and again, because he had pity on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked God's word and scoffed at his prophets until the wrath of the Lord was aroused against his people, and there was no remedy. He brought up against them the king of the Babylonians, who killed their young men with the sword in the sanctuary, and spared neither young man nor young woman, old man or age. God handed them all over to the Babylonians. He carried to Babylon all the articles in the temple of God, large and small, and the treasures of the Lord's temple, and the treasures of the kings and the officials. They set fire to God's temple and broke down the walls of Jerusalem. They burned all the palaces and destroyed everything in them. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. The King Nebuchadnezzar did what all empire builders do. They conquer peoples one after another. It's not a conspiracy theory. And the Lord used him to people for their disobedience. And the book, the Chronicles doesn't end by saying, let's say, and there were some SOBs, politely saying, there were some SOBs within Jerusalem who flung open the gates of Jerusalem and let the Babylonian in, and it was their fault that Jerusalem fell. That would have been a conspiracy theory, and it didn't happen. The Bible does not buy conspiracy theories. Rather, the Bible recognizes the universal foolishness and sinfulness of mankind. Now, last, how do you resist conspiracy theories? Number one, when there's a story circulating, ask not, well, so many things are possible, so many things that landed and they look like people and they start doing bad things. Is it probable? For instance, on the J conspiracy theory, is it probable that 1,200 special forces people can disarm and arrest people of Texas? No, that would be thrown out immediately. Also ask, does this circulating story pander to my socials group and to its fears? You have to step back a little bit and then see that. Remember also, as I first started, that Jesus said, you will be responsible for every evil slander that you issue. So if you fall into this, into any conspiracy theory, you're subject to the Lord's judgment. Now, I don't know how the Lord judged the thousands and thousands of Christians during the Middle Ages who believed this terrible story that the Jews created the Black Death, murder. I don't know how to judge them. I don't know if they all went to hell because of that. I'm not going to say that. When you're in a group and you believe what the group believes, in a sense, it's a lesser sin. But that's up to God. That's up to God. But if you slander someone, you'll be subject to some judgment. Some judgment. Jesus said this. So be very careful what you accept as a story to be true. Also ask for the Holy Spirit in discerning what is the conspiracy theory and what is the truth. So with those things, perhaps we can avoid this terrible reign of conspiracy theories that we now have. Thank you, and God bless you. Oh, I'm going to say it in Spanish. Por todo tiempo. Hey, that was good, even if you don't know Spanish.